Welcome to my virtual tour of the Pollinator Paradise Garden at Chatham Mills in Pittsboro. I wanted to share what's happening at the garden during the month of April and show you some of my favorite plants and pollinators. The Pollinator Paradise Garden is a project of the Chatham County Center of North Carolina Cooperative Extension. This demonstration garden is designed to showcase pollinator habitat for the Piedmont of North Carolina. My name is Debbie Roos, and I'm an agriculture agent with the Chatham County Center of North Carolina Cooperative Extension. I created the Pollinator Paradise Garden back in 2008, and it's since grown to include over 225 unique species of plants, 85% of them native to North Carolina. I manage the garden organically with a small group of volunteers. Early April's a really exciting time in the garden as everything's just starting to wake up. You can see the leaves just starting to expand on this woolly Dutchman's pipe, Aristolochia tomentosa. Everyone's always so excited to see the first blooms in the spring, but I'm telling you, I honestly get just as excited to see the new growth. You know, when shoots are emerging from the ground or leaves are slowly expanding. And by the end of April, you'll see the first blooms of the Dutchman's pipe, these really unusual flowers. Speedwell Veronica umbrosa is a non-native ground cover that blooms early in April. The honeybees and native bees always seem to find these tiny, delicate blooms. In early April, the flower buds of Black Hall Viburnum prunifolium, are visible. And by the end of April, the Black Hall Viburnum flowers are fully open and attracting lots of pollinators. This Black Hall Viburnum gets to be about 12 to 15 feet tall in the pollinator garden. Our native redbud, Cercis canadensis, is one of my very favorite native trees, and it's at peak bloom in mid-April and is beloved by the honeybees and native bumblebees. The dwarf fothergilla has really unique blooms and also pretty awesome fall color on the foliage. The rosemary is looking great in the spring in mid-April, and lots of different pollinators visit the flowers like this tiger swallowtail, as well as honeybees and other bees. Possum haw, Ilex decidua, is one of our deciduous hollies and is at peak bloom in mid-April. It also has great wildlife value with the berries it produces in the fall. Possum haw is a dioecious plant, which means it has male and female flowers on separate plants, which means if you want those gorgeous red berries, you need to make sure you have both male and female plants in your garden space. The native mining bees were all over the possum haw blooms in mid-April. It's usually right around tax day, April 15th, when I start seeing the first monarchs visiting the garden and laying eggs, like this egg on common milkweed leaf. And of course, not too long after you spot the first eggs, you'll soon find the small caterpillars munching down on all the various species of milkweed. And if you've got good eyes and get really lucky, you might spy one of our parasitoid wasps. This is a tiny trichogramma wasp, which is an egg parasitoid, and it's actually laying its egg on that monarch egg, which will parasitize it. Last fall, I planted a couple of bottlebrush buckeyes in a little shady area I had in the garden. This is Aesculus parviflora, and it was really exciting to watch the bud swell in the spring. This photo was taken on the same day in mid-April. This other bottlebrush buckeye was just a little bit ahead of its neighbor. I have two different species of golden alexander in the garden. This is Zizia aptera, or heartleaf golden alexander, and you can tell how it got its name from the shape of the leaves. The other species of Zizia I have in the garden is Zizia aurea, or golden alexander, and it definitely seems to be a favorite of the andrenid mining bees. It's also a native host for the black swallowtail caterpillar. Honeybees also love foraging on golden Alexander. Robin's plantain, Erigeron pulchellus, makes a nice ground cover in late April in the garden. I love the thin petals and delicate blooms of the robin's plantain. Downy phlox, or Phlox pilosa, is another gorgeous ground cover for the spring in the pollinator garden. White fringe tree, Chionanthus virginicus, is an excellent native small tree for a part shade area, and it's usually at peak bloom in mid to late April. I love the really unusual blooms of the white fringe tree, and it's also a great host plant for some of our butterflies. I was thrilled to spot this gorgeous Luna moth hanging out on the coneflowers at the end of April. Nothing to me says spring like the wild indigos or baptisias. I have several species in the garden. I could watch the bumblebees foraging on them all day and watching them brush the pollen onto the pollen baskets on their back legs. And you can see by the full pollen baskets on this one that she's been very busy collecting pollen. I have several clumps of bronze fennel in the garden to serve as a host plant for the black swallowtail caterpillar. I had mentioned earlier that their native host is the golden Alexander. Bronze fennel is, of course, a non-native culinary herb, and when the caterpillars first hatch, they resemble bird poop, which helps deter predators. This is also a black swallowtail caterpillar. This is a much older one, a later instar, and it will be pupating soon. But meanwhile, we can just enjoy watching it munch on the bronze fennel leaves. I find this very relaxing. The native columbines, Aquilegia canadensis, look gorgeous when combined with the golden Alexanders in the garden. The wild pink, Silene caroliniana, is a beautiful, low-growing ground cover that blooms in late April. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of the wild indigos. This is the Baptisia cultivar called Carolina Moonlight, with some native yucca in front of it, with the flower spikes that have not yet quite opened. And since I really never get tired of watching bumblebees brush pollen onto their legs, this is another forager on hybrid Baptisia with some blue star or Amsonia behind it. Our native blue star, Amsonia tabernaemontana, is a gorgeous spring bloomer, but actually has nice 3 seasons of interest. This native plant is called curly heads, which describes the seed heads you can see here. It's a non-vining native clematis, Clematis ochraluca. Dwarf wild indigo, Baptisia minor, looks great paired with downy phlox. Thank you for joining me for my virtual garden tour. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out my Pollinator Garden website, where you'll find hundreds of photos and videos, bloom list and plant list, and lots of resources to help you with your pollinator gardening efforts. See you next month.